This isn't a story about betrayal, not in the way you think. This is a story about a promise, and what it takes to keep it. There are only 3 things I ever truly feared in life: losing my grip halfway down a steel beam, saying the wrong thing to a grieving woman, and disappointing the ghost of my father. I managed to avoid the first 2. The third, that's the one that followed me like a shadow across the Atlantic. My name's Raymond McGregor. I was born in Inverness, in a house built by my grandfather's hands and held together with the kind of pride you can't buy at Home Depot. My father died before I could remember his voice, stormed the beach at Normandy, and didn't make it past the sand. All I've got left of him is a photograph in sepia tones and a Skyen doob, a Scottish ceremonial knife, black-handled and sharp enough to gut a man or slice an apple depending on the mood. That knife? It's more than steel and tradition. It's a damn reminder. Every McGregor man has passed it to the next, and the next, until it got to me, and then sat in a drawer for 30 years. I moved to the States in the 80s with a degree in civil engineering, a stubborn chin, and a suitcase that smelled like mothballs and ambition. I met Lori, as her sisters called her, in a church basement during a chili fundraiser. She was organizing the raffle and scolding a guy who tried to cheat with an extra ticket. I married her 6 months later. Lori was the kind of woman who could turn a pile of scrap fabric into a quilt, or a cold room into a home. Catholic, Irish roots, tough as nails, but she cried every time the dog in a movie died, and she wanted to be a mother more than she wanted anything in this life. We tried. God knows we tried. Candles, vitamins, calendars, acupuncture, one awkward trip to a fertility shaman in Sedona. She was hopeful, I was skeptical. But I wanted to see her cradle something that cried for her, the way she once cradled a broken robin she found in our gutter. Years passed. Tests came and went. Doctors started using words like viability and irregular uterine structure. I stopped pretending to understand, but I nodded like a man should. The final blow came on a Thursday. I was at a job site in Baltimore, standing ankle-deep in rebar and dust when the phone rang. My hands were caked in concrete. I answered anyway. Lori's voice cracked before the sentence did. No babies? Not now? Not ever. Something about her anatomy being incompatible with implantation. I don't remember the medical jargon. I just remember the silence that followed. The kind that buzzes in your ears and settles in your chest like a cinder block. That night, I ended up in a bar I don't remember walking into, somewhere off I-83. The kind of place where the jukebox plays old Springsteen on loop and the peanut bowls are 3 days stale. That's where I met Jenna. Now, before you raise a judgmental eyebrow, let me explain something. I wasn't looking to cheat. I wasn't looking for anything. I was just sitting there nursing a cheap bourbon and thinking about legacy, bloodlines, and the empty guest room that still had yellow paint on the walls. She sat down next to me like it was a movie scene. Blonde, sharp-tongued, a smile that looked rehearsed. At first glance, I figured she was the type who knew her way around a divorce attorney's office. She had that look, too pretty to be there for the atmosphere, too confident to be naive. "Rough day?" she asked. "You could say that." We talked. She ordered fries. We shared them. I told her more than I meant to. About the diagnosis, about my wife, about the knife in the drawer that had no one to go to. At some point, I paid the tab and she followed me back to the hotel. We got as far as the door. The key card didn't work the first time, always a sign, I think. I remember the carpet being ugly, that pattern with green diamonds and beige lines like someone tried to draw a battlefield and got bored halfway. We got inside. I took off my jacket. She kicked off her shoes. And then, right before anything could happen, she stopped. "I'm not doing this," she said, holding up her hand like a traffic cop. "You're not that kind of man." I blinked at her, stunned. "You don't know what kind of man I am," she smiled. Not flirty, not cruel, just kind. "No, but I can tell you want to be better than this." Then, and this is the part that still bakes my brain, she took my phone from the nightstand, scrolled through my contacts, and called my wife. She called my wife. 10 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Lori. eyes red, hair wild, keys still in her hand. I thought she'd slap me, scream, break something heavy across my face. She didn't. She walked in, looked at Jenna, then at me. Then she sat down on the edge of the bed like she was there for a conference. I cracked. Right there, told her everything. Not just about the bar or Jenna, but about the guilt, the knife, the pressure of being the last McGregor, how I'd failed her, failed everyone. She listened. God bless her. She just listened. Then, after what felt like a decade, she said, "You should have told me sooner. Not angry, not cold, just tired." She looked at Jenna and nodded, then said to me, "Get some sleep. We'll talk tomorrow." I don't remember falling asleep. Just the feeling of the air conditioner rattling above me and a weight leaving my chest like a steel beam finally lifted. I woke up the next morning to the smell of coffee. There were two women in the room. One was Lori, the other was her sister. There's something surreal about waking up in a hotel room with your wife on one side. And her sister pouring coffee like it's a Sunday brunch. At first, I thought I was still dreaming. One of those fever dreams where you're both guilty and forgiven and somehow barefoot in public. But no, I could smell the burnt hotel room. Coffee and the cheap peppermint shampoo Marnie always used. That scent could slap you awake at 40 paces. "Morning, Ray," Marnie said like she did this every week. Like this was just a normal start to a normal day, and not the aftermath of me nearly imploding my entire marriage. I sat up, blinked, and instinctively patted the nightstand for my pants. "What the hell are you doing here?" Lori handed me a mug like we were at a family reunion, not the scene of a moral car crash. "She's here because I called her." "Well, Jenna did, but I told her to stay." "You told her?" I looked at Marnie, then at Lori, then back again. "You brought your sister into this?" Marnie raised an eyebrow. "You make it sound like we're planning a heist." Honestly, that would have made more sense. Lori sat across from me, legs crossed, eyes calm but sharp. The kind of calm you get from someone who's been planning this conversation for a while. "You said something last night," she began. "About the knife. About your father. About being the last." I nodded, unsure if this was the part where she forgave me or filed for divorce. She continued. "I already knew." I blinked. "You what?" "I've known for years. You talk in your sleep, Ray. And that drawer you think is so well hidden? You left the key in your sock once." I looked. Of course she did. I opened my mouth, but she cut me off with that raised hand move women master by age 30. "You carry this burden like it's a backpack full of bricks, and you never told me." That's what hurt more than last night. I looked down. She was right. Of course she was. It was never about sex or cheating. It was about me keeping everything locked up like Fort Knox while she was left guessing why her husband stared at old family photos like they were blueprints to a lost future. Marnie sipped her coffee like she was watching a courtroom drama. "For the record," she said, "I've been telling her for years you're emotionally constipated." "Not helpful," I muttered. She shrugged. Then came the part that spun the earth off its axis. Lori leaned in, rested her hand on mine, and said, "I can't give you children. We've made peace with that, haven't we?" "I've tried to," I said, "but I still feel like I failed you." "You didn't fail me," she said. "You just never asked for help." Then she turned to Marnie. My stomach did a little backflip, and not the Olympic kind. More like a clumsy tumble down the stairs. "Wait," I said. "Wait a damn minute. What's going on here?" Marnie leaned forward, matching Lori's calm. "We've talked about it for a while now." I was speechless, which for a guy like me means I just made a lot of weird mouth sounds and blinked aggressively. "I can still have kids," Marnie said. "I'm healthy. I've had 2. Both. We're easier than building IKEA furniture." Lori looked me in the eye. "This isn't betrayal, Ray. This is a solution. A family solution." I stood up. "You want me to have a kid with your sister?" Marnie smirked. "Relax. We're not talking about candlelight dinners and slow jazz. Just a conversation. Options." I rubbed my face. The absurdity of it all hit me like a steel beam on the job site. "This is madness." "No," Lori said. This is us figuring out how to build something from the rubble. And here's the kicker. Part of me didn't hate the idea. I mean, not in a let's make a baby tonight way, but in a cold, logical engineering way. A path forward, a legacy salvaged, a damn blueprint. Of course, we didn't make any decisions that morning. That would have been too clean, too easy. Instead, we spent the next few weeks doing what McGregors do best. Drawing lines, making lists, pretending to argue while actually thinking it through. And slowly, things started to feel possible. We set boundaries. We met with doctors. Lori talked to a priest. Marnie made jokes about turkey bastards that made me want to disappear into drywall. Jenna, by the way, vanished as mysteriously as she arrived, left a note at the front desk. Not all angels wear wings. Some just drink your bourbon and push you toward the truth. Good luck, Highlander. Highlander. Jesus, the next 6 months were a blur. Appointments, legal paperwork, long conversations late into the night. But through it all, something strange happened. We became closer. The three of us. Lori and Marnie grew tighter. I started to see my sister-in-law not just as the loud-mouthed divorcee who played Fleetwood Mac too loud, but as someone offering us a future, a messy, complicated, borderline, ridiculous future. The kind that smelled like baby powder and hope. 1. Morning, after yet another early visit to the clinic, Lori handed me the knife, the ski-and doob, wrapped in cloth. I stared at it, confused. Why now? She smiled. Because the future is already moving, whether you're ready or not. And, if this works, you'll need to pass it on someday. I held the blade like it was a live wire, cold, silent, but buzzing with history. That night, I sat on the porch with Marnie. She sipped chamomile tea and stared at the moon like it owed her money. You ever think, I asked, how weird this is? She snorted. Every damn day. You sure about this? She looked at me, eyes steady. Lori's my sister, your family, and maybe this kid doesn't show up the normal way. But if they arrive in a world built on love and honesty, that's more than most get. I didn't respond right away, just sat there, feeling the weight of everything and, for the first time in a long time, not feeling crushed by it. Marnie nudged me with her elbow. You better be a good dad, McGregor. I built a suspension bridge in Pittsburgh that's still standing. I think I can handle Legos and sleepless nights. She laughed. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't betrayal. It wasn't pity. It wasn't even sacrifice. It was family, messy, real, damn complicated, but family. There are moments in life that stick to you like sawdust in sweat. First time holding your newborn. Last time hearing someone's voice. The day you realize your family isn't just who shares your blood, but who shares your burdens. Our first kid was born on a Tuesday. Not that I had any business being in that room. The nurse looked at me like I was the UPS guy who forgot to knock. Marnie handled the birth, like a prize fighter. Didn't scream, didn't curse, just grit her teeth and crushed my fingers like a hydraulic press. I told her if this engineering thing ever fell apart, she could arm wrestle for money. We named him Ethan. Not after me, though I lobbied hard for Raymond Jr., but after Lori's older brother, the one who died in a car wreck when she was 17. Ethan McGregor. Clean, strong, carried the kind of history that felt earned. And when I held him, this tiny, squirming mix of all our hopes, I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel shame. I felt something ancient stir in my chest. Like I'd taken a breath I'd been holding since I was 12 years old, staring at my father's knife and wondering if I'd ever deserve it. We had another child 2 years later, a girl this time, fiery like her aunt, stubborn like her mom, and able to charm a room before she could spell her name. We called her Moira, after my mother, who once taught me how to mend a rip in my shirt with dental floss and a needle. People didn't ask questions. Not really. Maybe they assumed adoption. Maybe they didn't care. Or maybe, just maybe, the sight of 3 people raising 2 kids with more love than most nuclear families was enough to shut down curiosity. Lori was always Mom. No debates, no confusion, no footnotes. Marnie somehow became Auntie Mama. Her words, not mine. She wore the badge like a sarcastic medal, said it made her sound like a weird cartoon character. But the kids loved it. And the truth? It fit. Our house turned into a home, toys under the couch, crayon marks on the hallway wall that I couldn't bring myself to paint over. Lori said they gave the place personality. Holidays became our version of chaotic bliss. Marnie's 2 older boys from her previous marriage blended in like extra branches on a tree. Loud, occasionally moody, but fiercely protective of their younger half-siblings. They called me Ray, except when they wanted something. Then, it was Uncle Ray, best dude ever. I wasn't trying to replace anyone. I wasn't chasing tradition for the sake of it. I just wanted to build something that lasted, something that would outlive me, and maybe, just maybe, make my father proud in whatever version of heaven they have for Scotsmen who die too young. Lori aged gracefully, if not slowly. She started knitting again, this time making elaborate, family trees stitched into throws. Said it helped her sleep. One night she made one with all our names surrounding a big embroidered McGregor in the center. Took her 3 months. I framed it and hung it above the fireplace like it was the Constitution. Years passed, not fast, not slow, just steady, like pouring concrete, thick, careful, and permanent if you do it right. Then one winter, Lori got sick. Didn't say anything at first. Just complained her bones ached. I thought it was the cold. We replaced the windows, bought a new space heater. Then she started forgetting things. Not big things, just small, odd ones. A recipe she'd made 100 times. The name of a song she used to hum when cleaning. The diagnosis came like a punch to the chest. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. I remember sitting in the parking lot outside the hospital, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. I didn't cry. McGregors don't cry in public. But I did something worse, and I started planning for the end. We got a hospice nurse. Nice woman. Firm hands. The kind who talked to you like you were still a person, not just a project. Lori stayed home. Refused the hospital. Said she wanted her last breath to be surrounded by curtains she picked out, not plastic ones hung on rails. Ethan was 15 when I gave him the knife. We were in the garage, standing beside the workbench I'd spent half my life avoiding projects on. I took the ski and doob out of its cloth and handed it to him. He didn't speak, just stared at it like it was glowing. This belonged to your great-grandfather, I told him. Passed down, one man to the next. You're the next. He ran his fingers over the hilt, like he was afraid it might shatter. Is it real? As real as anything that matters. Then I told him everything. About Scotland, about the night in the hotel, about Jenna, and the decision that followed. He didn't flinch, just nodded. You mad? I asked. No, he said, but I'm naming my first kid something cooler than Raymond. Smartass. After Lori passed, we held the funeral in the church where we met, the same one where she once yelled at a man for trying to steal a second raffle ticket. Full circle. Marnie held my hand the whole time. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Afterward, we went home. The house felt too quiet. Even the kids seemed to breathe softer. I found myself standing in the hallway, staring at that crayon drawing Moira made years ago, a crude stick-figure family with exaggerated ears and a crooked dog. Lori had once said, "Nothing real ever leaves. You, Ray, it just changes shape." She was right. That night I sat by the fireplace, pen in hand, paper on my lap. The kids were upstairs. Marnie was asleep on the couch, half covered in one of Lori's throw blankets. I could hear the wind outside, hitting the windows like soft fists. I wrote the first lines of this story, not for publication, not for sympathy, but because promises matter. Even the messy ones. Especially the messy ones. There's a point in a man's life where you stop looking forward and start taking inventory. It doesn't happen all at once. It's not a dramatic moment with violin music in the background. It's gradual. Like the way your knees start making that popping noise when you get off the couch. Or the way you start reading obituaries and recognizing more names than you'd like. After Lori passed, time moved like honey. Thick, slow, sticky. The kids tried to keep things lively. Ethan started college, came back home every other weekend with stories about impossible professors and girls who wore socks with sandals. Moira got into theater, played a talking tree in her school's production of Into the Woods. I told her she stole the show, and she said, "Dad, I didn't have any lines." I said, "Exactly. The mystery made you powerful." Marnie stayed. She never moved out, never brought it up, and I never asked her to. She kept the house loud enough to fight off the silence. She'd hum Fleetwood Mac in the kitchen, yell at the blender like it owed her money, binge old murder documentaries, and accuse the dog of looking too smug. She aged beautifully, not in that plastic Hollywood way, but in the way women do when they've lived fully. Lines on her face like well-drawn maps, eyes that didn't miss much, a mouth that still had too many opinions about my haircut. We grew old together without ever naming it. A few weeks after my 67th birthday, I started coughing up blood. Not a lot, just enough to raise an eyebrow. I didn't tell anyone. Not at first, went to the doctor by myself. Sat in that cold, sterile room while a kid with a stethoscope and a serious face used the words advanced and spread like he was discussing engine failure. Stage 4. Same sentence Lori got. I didn't feel fear. I felt clarity. That night I went to the garage, pulled open the drawer beneath the workbench. Inside, wrapped in black cloth, was the Skian doob. I sat there a long time, holding it, turning it over in my hand. The blade was still clean, never once used in violence, only memory. I thought about my father, my grandfather. Men I never really knew, but who somehow still shaped the kind of man I tried to be. Stubborn, honest, quiet when it mattered, loud when it counted. And I thought about Lori, how she used to stand in the garden in her bare feet, humming hymns to the roses like they were children. How she'd rest her head on my shoulder during storms and whisper, "We're the lucky ones, Ray." I didn't want to die in a hospital. I didn't want to die in a bed that didn't know me, so I made a plan, simple, neat, clean. I'd take a drive to the cabin, the one in the Shenandoahs we rented every Christmas, bring a bottle of good scotch. Make peace with the sky. Let Lori know I was on my way. I even packed my old coat, the one she liked with the elbow patches. Left a note for the kids, told them I loved them, told them not to argue with each other over who got the tools. Moira always liked the hammer anyway. I told Marnie I was taking a trip. She raised an eyebrow but didn't push. She always knew when I needed space. But apparently, she also knew when to ignore it. Because an hour later, just as I was pulling onto Route 33, headlights flashed behind me and a car pulled up alongside. It was Ethan. I rolled down the window. "How the hell did you find me?" He held up my GPS unit. "You left it in the truck. Didn't think a man driving to nowhere would plug in coordinates? Smartass." He parked, climbed into my truck, and sat quietly. Then he handed me something. "The knife. I think you should take it," he said. "You're not done with it yet." I shook my head. "It's yours now. Always was." He nodded. Didn't argue, but he didn't take it back either. Then he said something I didn't expect. "Stay until Christmas, Dad." "Why?" "For us." That hit harder than any diagnosis. We sat there in the dark, surrounded by trees and cold air and the kind of silence that wraps around you like an old quilt. I turned the truck around, stayed until Christmas, the last one. The tree was crooked. The lights flickered. Marnie burned the cookies. Moira's boyfriend wore pants so tight I thought he might pass out during dinner. Ethan made a toast that made Marnie cry and then promptly knocked over his wine glass. It was perfect. After everyone went to bed, I sat by the fire, pen in hand, and finished this letter. It's not a confession. It's not a goodbye. It's just a promise. That I tried. That I kept something alive. That I didn't let the line end with me. I don't know what waits on the other side. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's fields of green and old faces waiting by a hearth. But if there is something, I know who I'll see. Lori, in her favorite blue sweater, tapping her foot because I'm late. Marnie, arms crossed, already telling me I should have turned left instead of right. And Jenna, leaning on the bar in that worn leather jacket, lifting a glass and saying, "Took you long enough, Highlander." I'll smile, And I'll say what I always say when I finally get the job done. Better late than never.